Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a close look at what's happening with a real Canadian icon.
That's right. We've been digging into quite a few court documents, specifically about the restructuring of Hudson's Bay Company.
Yeah, and our plan here is to really unpack the key details from these sources. Understand the scale of it all and what it actually means for HBC based only on what's in these filings.
Exactly. It's basically a window into a major corporate shift happening under creditor protection, the CCAA process.
Okay, let's get into it then, because these documents, well, they paint a pretty stark picture, don't they? Starting with the people involved.
They really do. I mean, the scale is just massive. The filings state the company expects to lay off around 90% of its employees.
90%.
Yeah, that's about 8,400 people, and that's by June 1st.
Wow. That's nearly everyone they had when they filed for CCAA back in March, right? Wasn't it over 9,300 people then? Stores, distribution, head office?
Correct. And the documents mention even more layoffs are expected shortly after that. Around 900 more, anticipated by June 15th, which leaves, well, maybe only 100 employees left to help wind everything down.
That's quite something. And that ties into the stores too, I imagine. All 96 locations?
Uh-huh. The documents indicate all stores are expected to be shut by June 1st as well.
Okay, because I remember reading, maybe in earlier filings, that there was some talk of keeping a few flagships open, like the Toronto one.
Right, that was discussed. But according to these latest sources, that plan's been scrapped.
Scrapped? Why?
Well, the documents say it was actually getting in the way of raising funds urgently. They need to deal with about $1 billion in debt.
$1 billion.
Yeah. So liquidating all the stores, even the big iconic ones, became necessary. That liquidation process actually kicked off back in April for those remaining stores.
So how does a company even go about trying to raise that kind of money while winding down under CCAA? It sounds incredibly complex.
It is. And what's interesting in these filings is you see the different angles they're taking to try and get the most value. So yes, liquidating inventory is one part, but they're also trying to sell off other things. The documents specifically mention monetizing leases, selling intellectual property, even auctioning historical artifacts.
Okay, monetizing leases and intellectual property. Can we break that down a bit for someone maybe less familiar? What does that mean based on these filings?
Good question. So monetizing leases basically means trying to get value from the rental agreements they have for their stores.
Yeah.
Maybe selling a good lease to another company.
Right, if it's in a desirable location or has good terms.
Exactly. And the intellectual property, the IP, that's essentially the brand itself, the name, the logos, maybe customer lists, things that have value separate from physical goods.
And are there potential buyers named in these documents for the IP or the leases?
Yes, two deals are highlighted, actually. Both need court approval, of course, from the Ontario court handling the CCAA case.
Okay.
One is with Canadian Tire Corporation. That deal's worth about $30 million.
Hmm.
And the other is with a company run by Ruby Liu, the BC billionaire. That one seems to cover the intellectual property and the leases.
So the Canadian Tire deal, that sounds like they'd acquire the HBC brand, the iconic marks, and use them. So the name lives on, but with another retailer.
That's exactly how the sources frame it. It mentions the intention for HBC's iconic marks and intellectual property to be utilized by another of Canada's iconic retailers.
Interesting. And when is approval sought for these?
For the Canadian Tire deal and also for getting employees access to WEPPA, they expect to be in court June 3rd. The Liu deal approval looks like it will come later.
Okay, let's circle back to the employees. Thousands losing their jobs. What about support? You mentioned WEPPA.
Yes, the Wage Earner Protection Program Act. The filings confirm the company's lawyers are going to court on June 3rd to help employees access those payments.
And what is that exactly?
It's a federal program. It helps former employees get some compensation for things like unpaid wages, termination, severance pay when a company's insolvent or bankrupt, or under CCAA like HBC.
Is there a cap on that? Do the documents say?
They do. It mentions employees could be eligible for up to a maximum of $8,800 through WEPPA.
$8,800 max. Okay. And you also mentioned a potential hardship fund. Is that still happening?
Well, the sources say a later court hearing should have more details.
Right.
HBC had said before he was working on one with lenders.
Right.
And this document confirms they are still exploring the possibility of setting up a fund to help employees, especially after their benefits run out.
Okay. So if we try to pull all these threads together, what's the main takeaway for you, looking just at these court documents?
I think when you connect all the dots, the sheer scale of the layoffs and closures, That huge $1 billion debt, forcing the asset sales, the methods like selling IP and leases, and doing it all under the CCAA legal framework.
Yeah.
It gives you a really detailed kind of step-by-step view of how a huge historic retailer actually unwinds when it hits severe financial trouble. It's not just headlines, it's the mechanics of it laid bare in these filings.
It really is a stark look at the challenges facing retail today, isn't it? Even for a name like Hudson's Bay with all that history.
Absolutely. And it sort of leaves you with a big question to think about, doesn't it?
Which,
Well, what does it really mean when a company's been around for 355 years, winds down its operations like this? Liquidating everything, letting go of almost everyone. And then what does it signify for its legacy when its brand, its iconic marks, might live on with another Canadian retailer like Canadian Tire? It's definitely the end of an era in one sense, but maybe store something else for the brand name itself, something to ponder as these court dates approach.